Donald Trump has made history in lots of ways, probably too many to count, but they include racking up an all-time record of impeachments and indictments for a president or ex-president. He is also, as far as I know, and at least in the modern era, come the closest of any president to being found guilty of sexual assault. Last year, Trump was found liable for sexually abusing and defaming magazine writer E. Jean Carroll. Now, it was litigated in a civil trial. She sued him, which is a lower standard of proof than a criminal proceeding. But still, the jury deliberated on this. They got evidence. They found him liable. And the details are horrific. I think it has largely escaped penetrating the American consciousness because there's so much terrible stuff about him. Carroll accused Trump of raping her in a dressing room in the Bergdorf Goodman department store in Manhattan in the 1990s. He called her a liar. She sued him for defamation, and she won, with the jury awarding her $5 million in damages last May. Today, the day after his win in the Iowa caucus, the frontrunner for the Republican nomination was in court for the start of a second defamation trial over other instances of his dismissing Carroll's accusations as false. The jury will be asked only to determine damages because, as the judge said in court today, quote, "It has been determined already that Mr. Trump did sexually assault Ms. Carroll, that he knew when he made the statements about Ms. Carroll the statements are false, that he made them with reckless disregard." MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Ruman was inside that courtroom today, and she joins me now. It's so good to have you here.
Chris, thank you for having me.
So, first of all, do you have any sense of why he went to the trial today? I was a little surprised.
So I think there are two reasons that he went. One is a convergence of a legal and political strategy because Donald Trump seems to understand full well that his popularity rises in proportion to his playing the victim. And here, rather than allow E. Jean Carroll to robe herself in the victimhood that she has in fact earned, he instead decided he would play the victim so that when he goes back to New Hampshire, he can say, "Oh, I was trapped in that courtroom all day. I had to be there when I would so much rather be here with you." But I think the other reason that he went was to make eye contact with as many of the people who are either decision makers or accusers here as possible. And just like at his arraignment in Florida last year, when he turned around, faced the gallery, and stared down a gallery full of press, including me, today, those stares were reserved for the prospective jurors. And it included not only looking at them as they answered the judge's questions, but also a lot of gesticulating. For example, when Judge Kaplan asked, "Does anyone here believe President Trump has been treated unfairly by the justice system?" two prospective jurors stood up. But former President Trump also answered the question, even though it wasn't directed at him, by going like this.
Right.
And
so
it's performative.
The jury. He's
right?
trying to sort of manipulate the jury as much as he can. Now, the legal posture of this case, I had to go back and remind myself of it today. So remind us, obviously, there was a trial. We covered that trial. You covered that trial. He was found liable in order to pay damages. This is another trial. What is the origin of this?
So the trial last spring was about statements that Trump had made in October of 2022 on the verge of a deposition in the case that's being tried right now.
After he was president.
Correct. And because he was no longer president, there was less legal wrangling about his liability. That case went to trial first. Consider this trial about the bookends of defamation. This is principally about two statements he made in June of 2019 when E. Jean Carroll first came forward and published an excerpt of her memoir in New York Magazine. But it's also from a punitive damages perspective about all the different times Trump has repeated those defamatory statements since, including, as her lawyer Sean Crowley pointed out today, as many as 22 times just today in a truth storm as he was sitting in court.
Yeah, I mean, he has been, again, this sort of connects to what I was saying in the first. I mean, the way that he has talked about her on Truth Social is so despicable, so disgusting, so beyond the pale.
And so unrepentant, right?
I mean, yes, right, exactly. I mean, it's really, yes.
And one of the things I think Sean did really effectively today in her opening was ask the jury not to consider a specific monetary number in punitive damages, but to think about how to make that award significant, very significant. And she said, "I want you to think about this. How much will it cost to make him stop?" And then paused and said, "After all, this is a man who's a self-professed billionaire." So when we talk about the quantum of damages here, even though E. Jean's team is not talking about specific monetary amounts, I think what they are aiming for is something that really feels like a punch in the gut to former President Trump and causes him to think twice about continuing to do what he has done even as recently as this morning.
Right, and what he has been found civilly liable for doing and is causing damage. we should mention, again, over and above the sexual assault that he was found liable for by a civil jury.
And this trial isn't about the sexual assault.
No.
In fact, the jurors have to presume that that sexual assault happened, that it is true, that it was proven.
So Trump's lawyer also made her case today, or sort of opening arguments. What I read of it, again, gross. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, it was gross. There was an interesting exchange between her and Judge Kaplan that I thought of you, because the last time you were sitting at this table, we were talking about lessons from the civil trial in New York of Judge Engoron and how to deal with Trump lawyers and how to deal with Trump. And one of the things you and I discussed was no's got to mean no. You can't let them to keep litigating thing. And Kaplan said something in court today, almost literally like it was he had watched our segment when she tried to push on something.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to take credit for Kaplan watching our segment where we talked about sort of the vending machine theory of parenting and how it applies to judging, right? You put a quarter in and you get something out, you're going to keep doing it.
Right.
Kaplan has always been that person. And I think you could have a dozen former federal prosecutors from New York come on your show and tell you he has always been very tough on litigants. And when he says no, he's always meant no. The question was that the Lou Kaplan that was going to show up at this court, particularly with Donald Trump in front of him? And indeed today it was. And I hope it remains so. Yeah,
he said, Ms. Saba, that when I issue a ruling, it is the end of discussion, not the beginning of an argument, which I thought was a very clear message about how he wants us to go. There's going to be another day in court tomorrow, and we're expecting the former president to be there as well, and E. Jean Carroll will be in that courtroom.
That's right. And instead of staring at the back of her head, which was the only glimpse he got of her today, he's really hoping to stare down the barrel of the courtroom right into her eyes, something no person who's been victimized by Donald Trump should have to face.
Truly despicable all around, all of it. Lisa Root, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.